Agriculture report. Welcome, Tim Pendry, the chairman of the TPP or PTC. Sorry, correct.
TPPR, Public Affairs Consultancy.
Public Affairs Consultant. Thank you very much for coming. We have
pleasure.
seen the Trump interview with Piers Morgan. BBC website didn't give them. Were you surprised by Trump style?
I'm never surprised by Trump's style because he's always surprising. There's no doubt that he thrives on constantly shaking us up, making us think in different ways.
So in Britain, we were expecting him, as the BBC presenter, him to be rude, etc.
Yeah, and that's precisely what he wasn't.
Exactly.
He was very courteous and almost diffident
Ah.
at times, which is not like him at all. But on the other hand, I think he had a good interviewer in Piers Morgan.
That's right.
Another populist. I mean, somebody who understood how to get the best out of a man like that.
But, because the confrontational style the BBC uses actually gets people's back up. You don't get out of them.
It gets Trump's back up because he's a certain type of American businessman. And if you've done any business in America, you know it's a culture that's about individuals negotiating hard with each other as individuals. And that's his style. He's not a conventional politician. He's a businessman who happens to be in politics.
Liam Fox, if you're watching this, that's how you negotiate with the American businesses when we get a good deal after Brexit.
I'm ready to give tips at any time.
That's it? Go ahead, 10% for me?
Absolutely, that's a deal.
That's a deal. Thank you. Speaking of deals and Brexit,
yeah.
we have seen now accusation against the civil servant. I mean, if we show the viewers this cartoon there, and it's almost like IKEA,
the British
flat
Civil
bag,
Service.
trying to put the Brexit together.
Yeah. Well, the British Civil Service, now there's a story. Now there's a story.
This is sort of another cartoon, the Ministry of the Civil Walk.
The Ministry of the Civil Walk. I mean, we shouldn't be too hard on them. I'm trying not to be too hard on them. They're generalists, and they mean well, and they think they have a vision of the national interest, but they lack imagination, and they lack a vision of what democracy is supposed to be about. They lack flexibility. They've got it into their heads that Brexit is a problem. Brexit is not a problem, it's an opportunity. They can't understand that. So all the time in their scenario planning and their thinking and their papers, they're seeing it as something to be resolved through accommodation or through accepting that the other side has integrity. They're not thinking of it like a battle, which it is, a battle for Britain.
So is it actually Sir Humphreys? I remember the Yes Minister is Prime Minister. So the civil service actually is a machine that is oiling its own gears, looking after itself, rather than, I mean, seeing us, you and I,
Yeah, I think there's a truth
the peasants
in that.
that we should really.
Well, I think you're a bit too hard on them. A bit too hard on them, because I don't think it's that callous. I just think they have a worldview. In fact, it's a worldview you see in a lot of other places. I mean, the BBC has a worldview. The City has a worldview. And real imagination is getting outside that worldview and thinking both like the person you're negotiating with, of course, to understand where they're coming from, but also where the source of your power comes from. And the civil service has to understand that it's not the days of Henry VIII, that actually we, the people, increasingly dictate terms. And we did do it at a referendum for the first time.
Right, yes. I mean, that's actually, I think, the problem. So actually, there's two issues here. One is the European Union, many people see it as a civil servant dream because utopia. It's actually part of that accountability.
Yeah.
This week, also, the House of Lords. You mentioned Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Your uncle's in the House of Lords, and you.
Though I don't never speak for him.
He is a remain. They say, "Oh, we shouldn't give the government the power to issue regulations and become laws." But where were they for 40 years when the European Union were issuing this?
Oh, you've made the top point. Now, I have some sympathy with the critics of the legislation, because it isn't a great gain. It is a gain, but it's not a great gain if bureaucratic executive power simply shifts from an unaccountable bunch of civil servants in this empire to an unaccountable bunch of civil servants in this country. The reason I would back the legislation, though, apart from the fact that it's pretty clear that all this attack on it is really Remainers continuing to fight by the back door, is that we have to solve this problem quickly, and then it should be a political process to claw back power from the state and give it back to Parliament. In fact, not just Parliament, the people, because the parliamentarians keep forgetting where they come from. So in that sense, the critics do have a point, but I think it's partisan and not entirely to be trusted. And I don't like the way that paper was leaked. That was sinister,
very sinister,
just before the Lord's vote.
That's a good point. Now we give the time to the people and take a break. استراحة قصيرة نعود بعدها إليكم. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We've just been talking about the paper's view of the trying. Okay, some women, some feminists are upset. They're trying to ban these models, which is traditional.
For the walk-on girls.
The walk-on girls. It's traditional in the games, like the cheerleaders in the American football, which now being used in our country. I mean, I can't reconcile it. Yes, they have, but what are the point of view of these people who are earning living doing that?
Well, you mean the point of view of the darts girls?
Yes, they are earning living.
Yes, and they're working class women earning not a high. It's not high money. And one of the disturbing things about this, which is very disturbing about contemporary feminism altogether, and I'm prepared to say this. Many men are too scared to say this, but I'm going to say this, and that is. Often it's middle-class women who've come from universities, who've got an ideology, a kind of bitterness in their head about what they think men are like, possibly because they don't really deal with many men in many ways, not as they really are, which is actually pretty decent. And they're, as middle-class women, they're prepared to remove jobs from working-class women when those women, the working class women, have chosen to do those jobs. They haven't been pressurized to do them. So it's wrong, I think. It's a wrong.
So it is actually the point which is really confusing, and I get many emails from our viewers. When these people actually wave the flag of freedom and free choice.
You mean the feminists?
The feminists. And the left, the liberal left in general, the freedom of choice, people in the third world, people like countries like our viewers. When it comes to freedom of choice here,
you're absolutely right. They're intellectually very confused, and I think your viewers should probably understand that the left in the West is not what it was. It used to be the intellectual vanguard. It is not anymore. It's something else. It's a bunch of ideologists, people with a very fixed idea. In fact, I go so far as to say that the modern cultural left is more like a religious movement than it is a proper political movement of the old sort.
Guido, that's very interesting. If we can show our viewers, again...
Very moralist.
Moralist, okay. Yeah. Now, these are sitcoms. We probably would play a clip or two of comedies made 45 years ago.
Yes.
Bond films of the 1960s, they were made 50 years ago. Yes. Now, they actually want to censor that. Censorship of the past.
We call it, I come from the left, I should say, historically. I no longer consider myself part of it for this reason and only this reason.
Well, the intellectual left.
Intellectual left, And you've made a very good point. The censoriousness, the censorship is scandalous. This is not what the Enlightenment was about. This isn't what Voltaire was about. What they're trying to do, they're engaged in an attempt at a cultural revolution, cultural engineering. They want us to change the way we behave and think. Not what we do, but what we behave and think.
But what about the past, like in 1984?
Oh, the past. And they're rewriting the past. I mean, it's not only this story. There's a lot of other stories.
Like Cecil Rhodes' statue.
Yeah, the Rhodes statue will be the famous one.
Churchill, the attack on the cafe.
On the cafe, that's the one I was thinking of straight away. They want to censor because they're worried about our children seeing things that were historical because they have no context for history anymore. They don't learn about history.
But don't they realize that if it wasn't for men and women of
Absolutely.
the Second World War,
Yeah,
like
absolutely,
Churchill,
man.
like
Yeah.
my mother and your mother.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have had this freedom now to do what they do.
I know. It's a deep cultural problem, and in fact, you know, right-wingers talk about the West being decadent. I'd say this is the point at which it is not the things that the right-wingers say. This is the decadence. The decadence is the intellect, the loss, the collapse of the West as an intellectual force.
Speaking of that, these are the movement that propelled Jeremy Corbyn to leading the Labour Party. I've just shown here a young lady who can't afford a flat in London. She actually chose to live in a houseboat. Not comfortable, but it's cheaper for her. Now, we have two different visions now of dealing with the housing crisis. The Labour putting actually this vision of building how many million houses. Again, are the left here selling dreams without the sort of the economic reality that's on the housing crisis?
Well, my view on this is this is a national tragedy, and the national tragedy comes from actually New Labour failing to build, Tony Blair failing to build houses. So we have a double problem where the Conservatives are so obsessed with austerity they can't solve the problem.
Because they do not want to borrow money.
They don't want to borrow money to build the houses, yet this is essential, this is nationally essential. And they have an irony, by the way. We were talking about Corbyn, but it's a very interesting point about the Tory situation, because the irony is it's the Tory right, which you would not think, that wants to spend money. And it's the Tory left that wants austerity.
Actually, Nicholas Soames and the group from the Tory right, on Tuesday, they actually published this letter asking the government to buy 50 billion in the next 10 years to build the houses.
Yes, there's a kind of... this is confusing a lot of left-wingers, or historic left-wingers like me, because we're looking at this and we're saying, on one side is a left that lives off dreams and cultural rubbish, and we have a Conservative Party where the Tories, who are like the Cameron May type Tories, have nothing to say to us, and it's the Tory right, of all people, who actually got ideas about spending money and creating decent homes for people and doing all the things that we want, that Clem Attlee did in the 1940s, who was the great British Prime Minister who created the welfare state.
Thank God I have a splint now. I know where's my right from my left.
So we don't know our rights from our left anymore. We are confused. We are confused. The left is supposed to be about the Enlightenment, but it's not enlightened. The right's supposed to be about squeezing the population dry for the property owners, but it actually wants to give the money out. What do we do? What do we do? How do we vote?
God help us. I'm going to vote for the loony party. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Pendry, for coming to us. Thank you very much. It was enlightening. That's all what we have.